The rebuild continues, and the automotive world seems confused as Matt Armstrong just cleared the air and confirmed that he did use proper repair methods on the crash sensor wire. People accused him of cheap repairs, but he explains there was heat shrink underneath, and he even checked resistance values after soldering. He said this too destroys the narrative that he's just randomly bodging the car together while Bugatti stays completely silent in shame and disbelief. Hit the like button, share, and subscribe to this channel because the revelation he made about the pressure sensor causing all the saga online, which could potentially force the entire Chiron to be split apart again. Using the help of a hammer to bring the sensor out manually, he found out that the sensor causing all this drama is from an Audi A3. Another major example exposing how Bugatti shares parts with ordinary Volkswagen Group cars despite charging hypercar prices. That's insane for a multi-million-dollar car. A $129 sensor nearly caused another catastrophic teardown. Matt openly admits he's terrified of repeatedly undoing the titanium chassis bolts because titanium doesn't stretch like steel. It just snaps. Modern hypercars are no longer mechanical machines. They are giant computers. One unplugged sensor creates dashboard chaos, EPC lights, transmission warnings, airbag faults, AWD faults, steering faults. But this is where it gets worse. Because while Matt is dealing with a 129 Audi part on a multi-million-dollar hypercar, there is a second mystery hiding underneath all of this that almost nobody is talking about. A mystery involving an electrical system that was supposed to trigger the moment this car crashed. And somehow, completely, inexplicably, it didn't. And when Matt finally digs into why that happened, what he finds doesn't just raise questions about this specific car. Modern hypercars like the Chiron are built with a pyrofuse system. When a car experiences a significant crash, a pyrotechnic fuse is supposed to detonate and cut the entire high-voltage electrical circuit instantly. It's a safety system designed to prevent fires, to prevent electrocution, to protect first responders and occupants. It should have fired the moment this Chiron hit the barrier, and it didn't. Matt is standing there in his shop looking at this pyrofuse, completely intact, never triggered, and the question hanging in the air is terrifying. Why didn't it go off? Was the crash not detected as severe enough? Is the sensor that triggers the pyrofuse the same class of sensor we just found out is a repurposed Audi A3 part? Because if a $129 VW Group pressure sensor is also responsible for deciding when to detonate the safety cutoff on a $2.5 million hypercar, then we have a much bigger conversation to have. And what Matt discovered next changes everything. Because when he starts researching replacement pyrofuses, trying to source a new one just in case, trying to understand what he's actually working with, he finds out that the pyrofuse in the Bugatti Chiron is not a Bugatti-designed component. It's a Mercedes-Benz pyrofuse. The same safety component used in a production Mercedes sedan is sitting inside one of the most exclusive, most expensive, most supposedly bespoke hypercars ever manufactured. Think about that for a second. Bugatti charges customers millions of dollars based on the premise of exclusivity, based on the idea that every component, every system, every bolt is engineered specifically for this machine. And here is a safety-critical, crash-response electrical component that Mercedes-Benz is using in cars that cost a fraction of the price. The irony is almost too much to process. But the story doesn't stop there, because Matt actually tries to source a replacement pyrofuse, and this is where the rebuild gets almost darkly comedic. He manages to locate one from another crashed vehicle, a salvage part, a used pyrofuse that was presumably never triggered either. And the moment he goes to install it, he realizes he's been completely played. The part doesn't work. Whether it was internally degraded, whether salvage conditions affected it, whether there was some compatibility issue, it doesn't matter. The result is the same. Matt Armstrong spent time, money, and energy sourcing what he thought was a legitimate replacement for a safety-critical component, and he got handed a dud. He called it getting scammed, and honestly, that's exactly what it feels like. Except this isn't a scam on an eBay listing for a phone case. This is a safety system on a hypercar, and the fact that replacement parts for this class of vehicle have to be sourced from crashed donor cars tells you everything you need to know about how impossible Bugatti has made independent repair. And this exposed an even bigger problem, because the moment Matt starts testing circuits, checking wiring, probing sensors, he starts pulling back the curtain on a side of this rebuild that almost never makes it into the final cut of these videos. the troubleshooting, the actual raw, unglamorous process of diagnosing a car that doesn't want to talk to you. Sparks, wiring mistakes caught just in time, a sensor that reads fine on paper but throws a fault code when the car is running. Moments where Matt genuinely doesn't know what's wrong, and he's not pretending otherwise. He's not editing out the confusion. He's not cutting away when the answer isn't obvious. He's showing you the reality of working on a machine that was never designed to be worked on by anyone except the manufacturer's own technicians, using proprietary tools that cost more than most people's houses. And that's what makes this so significant beyond just the entertainment value. Bugatti built this car to be unrepairable outside their own ecosystem. They built dependency into the design. They built complexity as a control mechanism. And Matt Armstrong, working out of a shop, without Bugatti's blessing, without their software, without their diagnostic codes, is dismantling that control one fault code at a time. Every dashboard warning light that disappears is a small victory. And Matt describes it exactly that way. He describes sitting in the driver's seat watching the dashboard and feeling like he's fighting boss battles. One light goes out, then another. Then 3 more come back on, then one disappears again. It's not linear progress. It's a war of attrition against a system that was designed to resist exactly what he's doing. That wasn't even the craziest part. Because while all of this electronic warfare is happening, while Matt is hunting down Audi sensors and Mercedes pyrofuses and tracking down salvage parts that turn out to be worthless, the titanium bolt problem is quietly becoming one of the most genuinely frightening technical undercurrents of this entire rebuild. Matt has said it multiple times now, and each time he says it, you can hear the weight of it. Titanium bolts are not forgiving. Steel bolts stretch under torque. They give you a warning before they fail. Titanium doesn't do that. Titanium holds and holds and holds, and then it fractures. And every single time Matt has to remove and reinstall the chassis bolts on this car, the probability of one of them snapping increases. There are sections of this chassis that have already been accessed multiple times throughout this rebuild. Multiple removals, multiple reinstallations, and each one is a calculated gamble. Because a snapped titanium chassis bolt on a Bugatti Chiron isn't a trip to the hardware store. That is a catastrophic setback. That is potentially weeks of additional work and potentially additional access points that require even more bolt removals. The compounding risk is real, and Matt knows it, and the fact that he keeps going anyway says everything about the commitment level this project demands. But this is where it gets worse. Because as Matt is managing all of this, the sensors, the pyrofuse, the bolt anxiety, the dashboard lights, the wiring, Alex arrives. And if you've been following this build from the beginning, you understand exactly why that moment carries weight that goes beyond just excitement. Alex was driving this car the last time it moved under its own power at speed. Whatever Alex says in that moment, whatever expression is on his face, underneath all of that excitement is something that doesn't have a clean automotive word for it. It's the emotional weight of returning to the scene, except the scene is moving at speed on an unrestricted road. And next episode, when the custom bodywork starts taking its final shape, when the front end comes together and the fabrication work gets closer to finished, that's the moment when the full electrical system gets its most complete test yet. Because a car that runs without its body is one thing. A car that runs with every system connected, every sensor in place, every module communicating with every other module, that's when you find out if you actually won. And right now, nobody knows whether Matt has already beaten this car, or whether this car has one more fight left.